The grand lobby of Crestfall National Bank was polished to perfection. Shiny marble floors reflected the glow of golden chandeliers, while finely dressed clients strutted through with their noses tilted high. Among them moved Samuel, the black janitor, quietly pushing his mop and bucket. His uniform was faded, his shoes worn, and his hands cracked from years of scrubbing. To most, he was invisible. To others, he was just a black man meant to clean their dirt. "Move aside, janitor," a sharp voice snapped. It was Richard, the arrogant bank manager, strutting across the floor in his tailored suit. "You're dripping water on the floor. Do you know how much this marble costs?" His tone dripped with disdain, and laughter from a group of employees followed. Samuel bowed his head, not because he was ashamed, but because he was hiding a secret so powerful that if revealed, it would shake every arrogant soul in that bank to their core. For Samuel was not just a janitor, he was, in fact, the silent majority shareholder of Crestfall National Bank. Years ago, Samuel had inherited a small fortune from his father, a hard-working black businessman who believed in quiet power. Instead of flaunting it, Samuel invested wisely, eventually purchasing controlling shares in the very bank where he now scrubbed floors. He chose to work as a janitor, not because he needed the money, but because he wanted to understand how his employees truly treated people, and what he witnessed broke his heart. Every day, Samuel saw the racism dripping from the polished walls. Black clients were ignored or offered worse deals than white customers. Black employees were overlooked for promotions, while inexperienced white staff soared up the ranks. Even he, the hidden owner, endured insults as they mocked his skin and his job. One afternoon, a young black woman named Aisha entered the bank, dressed modestly but with determination in her eyes. She was there to apply for a loan to start her small business, a bakery inspired by her grandmother's recipes. Samuel had watched her grow up in the neighborhood. He knew her family, her struggles, and her talent. But when Aisha sat across from Richard, the arrogant manager, she was met with sneers. "A bakery? Really? We don't usually waste time on ventures like that," Richard said, emphasizing the word waste with a cruel smile. "Besides, your credit history is less than ideal. Why don't you try a community loan fund? This isn't really the place for people like you." Samuel's hands tightened around his mop handle. The words stung, not because they were new, but because they were painfully familiar. He had heard them before, when his own father tried to build a business in a world that never wanted a black man to succeed. Aisha's eyes welled with tears, but she held her head high. "I'll find another way," she whispered, standing to leave. Richard smirked, already dismissing her as if she were nothing. But Samuel's heart burned. He knew the time was coming when he would no longer stay silent. The people who mocked him, the people who belittled black dreams, had no idea who he really was. As he wrung out his mop for the last time that day, Samuel looked up at the massive glass doors of the bank. Tomorrow, he decided, would not be another day of silence. Tomorrow, the world would begin to learn the truth, that the black janitor they mocked was the man who held the keys to their future. And when that truth came out, justice would not be whispered. It would roar. The next morning, the bank bustled with its usual rhythm of hurried footsteps, ringing telephones, and the smug laughter of executives in glass offices. Samuel entered quietly, his mop bucket squeaking across the marble floor. To everyone else, it was just another day. But for Samuel, it was the day he had decided to stop being silent. Richard, the arrogant manager, was in rare form. He strutted through the lobby barking orders, belittling employees, and ensuring everyone knew who was in charge. He spotted Samuel near the reception desk and sneered. "Samuel," he said, dragging out the name as if it were dirt on his tongue. "Do you think you can clean faster today? We have an important board meeting, and I'd hate for our guests to think this place smells like bleach and sweat." The staff chuckled. Samuel forced a smile, but inside his heart thundered. They had no idea that the important board meeting Richard bragged about was one where Samuel's presence would be far more significant than they could ever imagine. Behind the closed doors of the top floor, preparations were underway for the quarterly shareholders' assembly. The bank's most influential investors were flying in, including the mysterious majority shareholder who no one had ever met. Richard himself had never seen him, but he often spoke of this shareholder as if he were some untouchable figure who surely shared Richard's prejudice. "Probably an old white billionaire," Richard once joked at a staff party. "The kind who knows real business, not some janitor." The employees laughed, except Samuel, who stood quietly in the corner, unnoticed. That morning, Samuel's routine took him to the conference room where the board meeting would be held. He wiped the long mahogany table, dusted the golden lamp fixtures, and arranged the leather chairs. A group of young executives walked past, snickering. "Look at him polishing the table for people who will never even know his name," one whispered. "Imagine being a black janitor your whole life," another added with cruel laughter. "Pathetic." Samuel's hands slowed for a moment, but he said nothing. He simply finished his task, his silence sharper than any blade. Because soon, these very chairs would host the men and women who thought they held the power, and Samuel would show them who truly did. Later that afternoon, the lobby filled with expensive shoes clicking against marble as the shareholders began to arrive. Richard fawned over them, offering champagne and shallow flattery. He glanced at Samuel and snapped, "Stay out of the way. The last thing we need is a mop bucket tripping one of our VIPs. Samuel bowed slightly, hiding the faint smile tugging at his lips. If only Richard knew the truth, that Samuel was the most VIP of them all. As the shareholders gathered upstairs, the room buzzed with talk of profits, stocks, and market trends. Richard stood at the head of the table, rehearsing his speech in his mind, eager to impress. He was determined to use this meeting to climb higher, maybe even push for a promotion to regional director. But when the head of the board cleared his throat, the room fell silent. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "today we have the honor of finally meeting our largest shareholder, the one who has quietly guided this institution from behind the scenes." Richard's chest swelled with anticipation. He imagined shaking hands with a silver-haired billionaire, someone who would see Richard's talent and elevate him. The door creaked open. Shoes scuffed against the polished floor, and when the figure stepped in, gasps rippled across the room. It was Samuel, the black janitor, the man they had mocked, insulted, and dismissed. Richard's face drained of color. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Samuel walked to the head of the table, his posture calm, his eyes steady, and for the first time, his silence broke. "Good afternoon," Samuel said, his deep voice carrying authority. "I believe introductions are overdue. My name is Samuel Carter, and I am the majority owner of Crestfall National Bank." The room froze. For the first time, Samuel wasn't invisible. He was undeniable, and the arrogance of men like Richard was about to meet its reckoning. The silence in the boardroom was deafening. Dozens of eyes stared at Samuel, some wide with shock, others narrowed with disbelief. For years, these executives had laughed at him, stepping past his mop bucket without a second thought. Now the same janitor stood at the head of the table, introducing himself as the bank's majority owner. Richard was the first to break the silence. His laugh was forced, nervous, desperate. "This must be some kind of mistake. You're the janitor. You mop floors, you—" "I clean up more than floors, Richard," Samuel interrupted, his voice steady but firm. "For years I've been cleaning up the mess of this institution. Messes created by arrogance, greed, and yes, racism." The word hit the room like a thunderclap. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others scoffed under their breath. Samuel scanned their faces, his gaze heavy, unflinching. "You see," he continued, "when I inherited my father's shares, I decided to watch. I wanted to see not just numbers on paper, but the character of the people running my bank. So I worked here quietly. as a janitor. And what I saw—" He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "Was a sickness." Murmurs rippled around the table, but Samuel pressed on. "I saw black clients turned away for loans they qualified for, while less qualified white clients were approved without question. I saw black employees overlooked for promotions while less experienced white staff were elevated. And I saw firsthand how a black man with a mop in his hand became invisible, or worse, the target of mockery." His eyes locked onto Richard. "I saw you, Richard. I saw how you sneered at people who looked like me, how you dismissed dreams because of the color of their skin. Just yesterday you turned away a young woman named Aisha, who came here to request a loan for her bakery, a woman with more determination than any man in this room. And you crushed her with your arrogance." Richard stammered, his face flushed red. That was just business policy." "No," Samuel cut him off, his voice rising for the first time. "That was racism dressed as policy." The room fell into an uneasy silence. No one dared to meet Samuel's eyes. The truth, raw and unfiltered, hung in the air. Samuel placed both hands on the polished mahogany table. "I have tolerated this long enough. This bank will not stand as a monument to prejudice. It will stand as a symbol of fairness, and that begins today." The head of the board cleared his throat nervously. "Mr. Carter, with respect, we didn't know—" "You didn't care to know," Samuel replied coldly. "Because in your eyes, a black man with a mop couldn't possibly be someone of worth. That blindness, that arrogance, is why this institution will change under my leadership. Starting now." Richard's voice cracked as he tried to protest. "You can't just—" "I can," Samuel said firmly, his eyes piercing. "And I will, because I am not just your janitor. I am your employer. And this is not just my bank. It is a chance to right the wrongs that people like you have made far too common." The room was silent again, but this time it was not from disbelief. It was from fear. The executives had mocked the black janitor. Now they were facing the black owner who saw through every mask they wore, and Samuel was just getting started. The tension in the bank had reached a boiling point. Samuel walked quietly through the office, his mind sharp, calculating every move. The whispers followed him, executives still skeptical of the young black man who had suddenly appeared from nowhere to claim authority. They thought they could intimidate him. They were wrong. Aisha, the black maid who had secretly been gathering evidence of Richard's corrupt dealings, slipped him a folder. Inside were financial documents proving that Richard had been hiding assets and manipulating records. The proof was undeniable. Samuel smiled quietly. He had everything he needed to confront the board. He stepped into the executive office, where Richard sat smugly behind a polished mahogany desk. "Samuel," Richard sneered, "you really think you can just walk in here and—" "I don't think, Richard," Samuel interrupted, voice cold and firm. "I know, and I have proof." He tossed the folder onto the desk. Richard's smug expression faltered as he flipped through the documents. His hands shook slightly. "Where? How?" Samuel's eyes glinted. "You underestimated the power of black insight. While you were busy mocking and belittling, the black maid you dismissed as insignificant collected every piece of evidence you tried to hide. Black intelligence is not invisible, Richard. It's unstoppable." The office was silent, save for the sound of Richard fumbling with papers. The other executives in the room exchanged nervous glances. The once confident Richard, who had mocked Samuel and even questioned the black maid's abilities, was now exposed. "You see," Samuel continued, "racism doesn't just harm those you target. It blinds you to truth, to talent, to justice. And today, that blindness ends." Richard tried to regain control, his voice rising in panic. You can't do this. I run this bank." Samuel leaned in, his tone firm and unwavering. "No, Richard. You ran it with fear, with prejudice, and with deceit. That is over. Today, justice begins, and black voices will no longer be ignored. He turned to the room, eyes scanning each board member. Every single one of you has a choice. Stand for fairness or be complicit in the lies that have dominated this institution for decades. The executives shifted uncomfortably, whispers of fear and realization spreading among them. Samuel wasn't just fighting for himself, he was fighting for every black employee, every ignored talent, every person who had been silenced by prejudice. Aisha stepped forward, her presence commanding respect. "This isn't just about exposing corruption," she said. "It's about showing that black voices have power, intelligence, and authority. We will no longer accept invisibility." The board members froze. For the first time, they saw the black maid not as a servant, but as a key figure in the reckoning of their biased institution. Samuel nodded at her, silently acknowledging her courage and brilliance. Richard's face twisted with anger and desperation. "You'll pay for this!" he barked. Samuel's lips curled into a small, confident smile. "No, Richard. Today, justice pays you back, and the world sees black excellence shining through the shadows of prejudice." As Samuel left the office, the echoes of his words lingered. The black heir and the black maid had become an unstoppable force. Their courage, intelligence, and determination were rewriting the rules of the bank. And nothing, not mockery, not prejudice, not fear, would stand in their way. The stage was set. The confrontation with the board was imminent, and Samuel was ready to reclaim what was rightfully his. The black legacy he carried would not be denied. The boardroom was electric with tension. Samuel stood at the center, the folder of damning evidence still in his hands. The executives who had once scoffed at him now sat in stunned silence. Every whisper, every smirk, every act of underestimation they had directed at the black heir was now turning against them. Richard's face was red with fury, veins bulging at his temples. This is impossible. How did you get these documents?" he yelled, slamming his fists onto the polished table. Samuel's gaze was steady, unwavering. "You didn't see it coming because you assumed the black maid who serves quietly could not have influence or intelligence. That was your mistake." Aisha, the black maid who had been dismissed as inconsequential by Richard and the board, stepped forward, her presence commanding respect. "While you were busy mocking Samuel and ignoring the black potential around you, I was gathering the truth. Corruption, lies, and theft. You hid them all, but not anymore." Richard's mouth opened and closed, searching for words. The other executives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Their eyes were no longer filled with arrogance. They were filled with fear and disbelief. "Look closely," Samuel continued, spreading the documents across the table. "This bank, this institution thrived on deceit and discrimination. You believed black talent was invisible, weak, or unworthy. But black brilliance is not a threat. It is justice waiting to be acknowledged, and today it is undeniable." A wave of murmurs swept through the boardroom. For the first time, the power dynamics had shifted. The black heir who had been ridiculed, the black maid who had been dismissed, were now in control. Richard stood, shaking, trying to regain authority. "I won't let you destroy everything," he spat. Samuel stepped closer, voice low and steady, yet filled with undeniable authority. "You didn't destroy anything, Richard. You revealed your own failures, and the world is watching. Every act of prejudice, every attempt to silence black voices, it ends here." Aisha added, "We are not just fighting for Samuel. We are fighting for every black employee, every overlooked talent, every person silenced by prejudice. The truth will no longer be hidden in the shadows of your arrogance." The boardroom fell silent. The weight of their actions, the years of bias, and the undeniable proof of corruption left them speechless. Richard's chair scraped loudly against the floor. "This isn't over," he threatened. Samuel smiled faintly. "It is over for you, Richard, and it is the beginning of something much greater. For black excellence, for justice, and for truth. With that, Samuel turned and left the boardroom, Aisha following closely behind. The black heir and the black maid had reclaimed what was rightfully theirs. Not just money or status, but dignity, respect, and justice. As they walked down the marble hallway, Samuel glanced at Aisha. "We did it," he said quietly. Aisha nodded, eyes shining with pride. "We showed them that black voices matter, black intelligence matters, black courage matters." And for the first time in the history of that bank, the executives realized that underestimating the black heir and the black maid was a mistake they would never forget. The era of silence and invisibility for black talent was over. Outside, the city seemed brighter, the possibilities endless. Samuel's journey was far from over, but one thing was clear. The black legacy of courage, intelligence, and justice was unstoppable. The city skyline glittered like a crown, a reminder that opportunity and justice could shine even in places long dominated by greed and prejudice. Samuel and Aisha stepped out of the corporate building, their heads held high. The black heir and the black maid, once ignored, dismissed, and mocked, now held undeniable influence. Every step they took echoed a story of courage, a story of black resilience. Samuel could still hear the whispers from the boardroom, the gasps of executives who had thought their power was untouchable. But those whispers now served as a reminder. Black voices cannot be silenced. Black brilliance cannot be hidden. Samuel turned to Aisha, the woman who had been his quiet ally, his unexpected strategist, and his unwavering support. "We did more than reclaim the fortune, Aisha. We reclaimed dignity. We proved that black potential cannot be dismissed or underestimated." Aisha smiled, her eyes reflecting pride, determination, and a spark that had only grown stronger through every obstacle. Every person who ever faced prejudice, who was told they weren't enough, they'll see today that black courage can overcome anything. The media had already caught wind of the scandal. Headlines screamed about the black heir who had defied a corrupt system, and the black maid whose intelligence had saved the company and exposed years of deceit. Samuel knew this wasn't just a personal victory, it was a victory for every black individual who had been sidelined, underestimated, or ignored. As Samuel addressed reporters, his words carried the weight of history. "This isn't just about wealth or inheritance. This is about justice, about showing that black voices matter, black intelligence matters, and black determination matters. Today, we change the narrative. Today, we set a new standard." Questions flooded in, but Samuel's focus remained sharp. "We are not seeking revenge. We are seeking recognition. Recognition for the black talent that has been overlooked, underestimated, and undervalued for far too long." Aisha stood beside him, quietly proud, her presence commanding attention. "And let this be a message to anyone who doubts black potential. Underestimate us, ignore us, dismiss us, but we will rise, we will fight, and we will prevail." The boardroom chaos had turned into a movement. Social media buzzed with admiration for Samuel and Aisha, for their courage, their brilliance, and their refusal to remain silent. Comments poured in. "Finally, black talent is being recognized. This is inspiring. Justice served. Black voices are powerful, and this story proves it." Inside, Samuel knew the journey was far from over. There would always be challenges, critics, and obstacles. But now, with Aisha at his side, the black heir felt unstoppable. Together, they had transformed personal struggle into collective triumph, prejudice into opportunity, and silence into a resounding voice of justice. That evening, Samuel returned to the family estate, once a place of mockery and isolation. Now, it was a sanctuary of black achievement, a symbol of resilience and justice. He walked through the halls, memories of ridicule and scorn fading into a new reality where black excellence was celebrated and unstoppable. Aisha followed, carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had changed the course of history through courage, intelligence, and unwavering integrity. Samuel turned to her one last time. This fortune, this power, it's more than money. It's the proof that black lives, black intelligence, and black courage cannot be ignored. Aisha nodded. And we will continue to show the world that black potential is limitless. As the sun set over the estate, a new era began. A black era defined by justice, recognition, and unstoppable courage. The black heir and the black maid had not only uncovered a hidden fortune, they had sparked a movement, proving once and for all that prejudice would never prevail over truth, resilience, and the power of black voices.